You're listening to The Western Rookie, a hunting podcast full of tips, tricks, and strategies from seasoned Western hunters. There are plenty of opportunities out there. We just need to learn how to take on the challenges.
Hunting is completely different up there.
I've harvested 26 big game animals.
You can fool their eyes, but you can't fool their nose.
300 yards back to the road turned into 3 miles back the other way.
It's always cool seeing new hunters go and harvest an animal.
I don't know what to expect.
If there's anybody I want in the woods with me, it'll be you.
Duane, got you in the podcast. How's it going today, bud?
Pretty good.
Yeah?
Enjoying some snowy weather and hanging out, trying to find stuff to do.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat. We're getting dumped on again today, another 6 to 10 inches. It's pretty much put a cease to all shed hunting, which sucks. And
Yeah.
as I was getting set up, I was kind of wondering about you, and I was thinking, I wonder if Duane is getting more excited for like application season and elk hunting, or is he just solely focused on fly fishing?
Man, I've been kind of cooped up. My daughter, she played basketball this year, and so I've been kind of chasing that around and really haven't had a chance to get out with the fly rod, and so I'm really chomping at the bit to do that. I mean, this time of year, especially once March hits, fly fishing takes over for me.
Yeah, I will say I've never fly fished at all. I love fishing. But to me, I love hunting way more. And when I was looking at your Instagram page just a little bit ago, it's like I think you're at like a 5-to-1 fish to animal ratio. So would you say fly fishing is like the number one on your list?
Yeah, mostly because that the season's longer for me. I mean, I'll even take breaks just once archery season's over. October, November, if the weather holds out good and flow levels on some of these rivers are good. I mean, that I'll take breaks from rifle hunting to fly fish. And even archery season, like I hunted Colorado early in archery season this last year, and I took my fly rod with me. There were a couple of days it was slow, it was hot, and I just went down, threw on a pair of chacos, and climbed in the river and caught fish.
I'm such a newbie when it comes to trout and fly fishing. Is that something that you would like cook up at elk camp then and like eat the fish you catch, or does it not?
I mostly for me with fly, I don't particularly enjoy eating trout. I guess it's more I enjoy torturing them with a hook and sticking them back in the water.
Yeah.
But here and there, I'll keep one, and I have done it, especially backpacking in the summer. I'll get up to some of those high mountain lakes and I'll go ahead and keep a couple and cook them over a fire or whatever. But no, I don't eat a lot of trout. I just like catching them.
Yeah, it's probably one of those things where a guy should get more into it, because every 8-9 day elk hunt we've ever done, there's always like one day where you're like not feeling like you want to go peak the mountain. Yeah. And so at least if you brought a fly rod, you could be doing something fun versus just sitting in your bunk.
Yeah. And actually, up there, where I met you last year, there's some creeks and stuff that are running through that area that, you're not going to find like big fish in there, but there's brook trout and stuff in there. And if I do have to eat a trout, a lot of times, one of those smaller brook trout is probably my favorite. You just stick it on a stick and roast it.
Yeah. I suppose depending on how deep you are, how long ago you ran out of food, I bet that brook trout starts tasting really good.
Yeah.
If you're hungry enough. Which I did want to mention, kind of talk about how we met. So you and I, we met last year in elk camp. just by
Yep.
chance. Like we didn't go to the same hunt. We just found out we were camping next to each other and hitting the same glassing spots most days. And
Yep.
eventually, you know, I feel like it's probably however you meet someone hunting, you're kind of like pretty cautious at first. Like, yeah, we're hunting kind of
Yeah.
over there. And then once we started to, I mean, we're seeing each other almost every day. Eventually we figured out, okay, like those guys just hunt over there. We've never been over there. We're hunting over here, not too much overlap. So then it was kind of more fun to kind of be a little bit more open about like what we've been seeing,
Yeah.
or in the case of last year, what we haven't been seeing, was usually the story of the day. But I did want to give a huge shout out. So if it wasn't for Duane here and his brother, me and my brother would very likely still be packing jacks and parts up the mountain, because we had some technical difficulties. We popped a Ranger tire on probably one of the worst roads we have ever used to elk hunt. Vertical, steep, rocks, dugouts and washouts, and that's where we popped a tire right at last light, right as a thunderstorm was rolling in.
Yeah.
And so we made a quick decision to bust it down that hill. We actually took the way I think you guys typically go up. We got off trail. We tried to cut some distance off of it, but we were basically diving off a cliff in the dark that we've never done before. And got back to camp, and luckily there Duane and his brother were having a beer on the fire and had 2 4-wheelers, and we asked if we could borrow one and go up there and take the spare off or take the tire off, bring it to town, and then use the 4-wheeler again to bring it up. And actually, is Ken your buddy? Is that his name?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, Ken actually found your 4-wheeler on his way out, and he was going to say, oh, I'll just bring it out for everyone so no one has to make a 4th trip. And I didn't know where to put your key, so I just kept it in my pocket. But otherwise, yeah, he could have brought your 4-wheeler out for you. So
Yep. Yeah, that was, I don't know. That's one of the cool things to me, you know, with elk camp like that. You know, if you know, there's definitely those guys, you know, they're super secretive. They're super cautious about, you know, but you know, if you find somebody, you know, you run into somebody that you know, personality wise, you do well with. You know, it's nice having, you know, we didn't like go hunt together or anything like that, but we kind of got to the point where we were just kind of checking in with each other and making sure we knew where everybody was going to be. And then that way, like in the evening, because even that night, you know, we'd noticed that you guys hadn't come out yet. And, you know, we were like, well, you know, maybe they got something down, but it's nice to have those open lines of communication, especially back in a place like that where, you know, even in good conditions, you know, it's a haul to get out of there. And,
yeah.
so, you know, it's nice having people around, you know, that, you know, we weren't in each other's business, but we knew where each other was at so that we could, you know, kind of have that safety net.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. It's kind of like a community aspect to elk hunting, right? Where it's like, I don't sleep in your house, but I know if I need help, I know where I can knock on a door. And in that particular place, I feel like that's almost a rarity, because we see all the other people that kind of hunt in that general mountain, and we're like, we're not going to get along with that group. Like the way they are operating and what they're doing, especially the year before we met, we were there for rifle season.
Ooh,
yeah,
that's rough up there.
Yeah.
You know, you get, and you know, and I mean, I understand it to a point. You know, there's a lot of locals around that are very protective of, you know, their secret spot that, you know, that we all know about. And you know, and they just, you know, they're almost kind of standoffish if you're not a local. And I get it, but you know, I don't agree with it, but I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was more so standoffish. I'm sure some people were. Somebody actually found my spotting scope. It bounced off my 4-wheeler on that really bad road. And then I went around that entire area that night asking every camp. And eventually I found the people back on the mountain the next hunt. And I was like, hey, by the way, did you find my spotting scope? Because you were up here yesterday. And he goes, yeah, it's back at camp. Follow me out and I'll give it back to you. And I was like, sweet. But it's more so, I think, we are elk hunters that happen to have a four-wheeler and we use it as a tool.
Right.
I think a lot of people in that valley are off-roaders that happen to have a rifle.
Right.
And that was the difference that really frustrated us is opening day, you're hearing more ATVs and side-by-sides hitting the red line than gunshots.
Yep.
And so we're like, yeah, maybe not anymore for rifle, but we'll come back for bow. And then we met you, and then we actually met that cowboy who was hilarious.
Yeah.
And the next day after you basically saved us, he came knocking and was like, hey, I buried my truck. Like, I can't get out of this little place where I'm camping. And so we had to pull him out too. And he was buried. There's no way. It was going to be a long walk up and over the ridge to get back to his headquarters to get some help for him.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, no, ironically, right before we popped that tire, I had a cow at 60 yards and I was really looking like we were locked. So I could have probably slowly drawn and shot, but what I couldn't really do was like make sure I had a good range and they were open country. And so I was like, I just don't feel like I want to push the limit. 60 is already a long ways, and then 60 without a guaranteed range, like a solid range and adjustment. It's not a shot that's favoring me as the hunter anymore. So we got into a big herd. My brother saw that day, he saw about a 3. He thinks it's mid 3s, and he's seen a lot of bulls, so I believe him. And because I let out a bugle, and we hear a response about 300 yards away, just like you do, right? Just elk hunting. And so we're looking, and usually it's kind of funny because once you've done it enough, like, don't just take off. Like, pull up the map, check the wind. Okay, we think he's here. Let's do this. Well, all of a sudden he bugled again, and he had cut the distance in half in about 10 seconds. And so we're like, oh crap, this is not good. He's above us about 100 feet. He's coming fast. And so we just try to run. Well, sure enough, deadfall. Like, we're in the middle of deadfall.
Yeah.
And so we both trip and fall, and we make it all of about 10 feet, and he's there. Full herd, huge bull. Turns out a different hunter jumped him and his herd tracking his bull. And it just was coincidence that I bugled, but he was gonna run over us anyway. So he winded us. We had bad thermals, and he was above us, and we had no time to move. But we saw that big bull. I think it's probably a big bull that you guys had also been seeing.
Yeah, it probably was there. Yeah, there was one real good bull, and then there were a couple others that were. I mean, they were decent bulls. But I don't, when it comes to those bulls, and I've got a bow in my hand, I'm not real. I'm not real picky.
No, I was about to shoot the raghorn that he was with. He was at 50, and he went behind a tree, and I was at pulling back to like get him on the other side. And right as he was behind that tree was when everything kind of caught our wind at that moment. That raghorn, I think, blew through our wind because he was going so fast and he wasn't as smart. But the lead cows and that big bull caught our wind, and everything locked up and just took off, which was a bummer. It's cool to be close, but that whole day, like, we were in them, and then right at last light, I almost shot that cow. And then thinking back, like, oh my gosh, what if we would have popped that tire at, like, looking back, seeing that thunderstorm came through after dark, and then we would have still been quartering and packing, and then we would have had a flat. I mean, it would have been a survivable ordeal, but it would have been a real bummer.
Yeah.
So glad it kind of worked out the way it did. Hindsight.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you get that was a bad spot, and yeah, we were just happy that we were there to help you guys out of that, because that could have been bad.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. We did go home that night, and we were like, man, I don't know. Duane's brother didn't really seem so hot on that idea. Like, we're a little worried. And then the next morning, your brother's like, dude, I am so sorry. I heard the whole conversation from the bathroom. I thought my brother already said yes. I didn't realize he said, I'll ask my brother. And I didn't mean to be such a dick. And we're like, we didn't think you were a dick, but we were a little bit worried. Like,
yeah. Cause he comes out and he's kind of standing around there, and we're kind of telling him what happened. And it was just kind of like this uncomfortable silence. And I'm like, really? You're not gonna let him use it, And then he's like, Oh, I thought you already said they could.
Yeah. It was a real big sigh of relief when he said that the next morning, because we kind of left it at like, well, we'll check in the morning, and then we knew that the Cowboy had that real old raggedy solid axle four-wheeler, and that was like our next option. Was like, I bet he's not using that.
Yeah, that would have been a bad one to take up that road too, because that solid axle, that's a road that you crack that axle.
Yeah, it's bad. It is bad. And we thought about it. Like, my dad has a carbon copy Ranger of my brother's, so we should have just put it up on blocks and took the front and rear tire off of it and brought him with as spares.
Yeah.
That's something that definitely we need to add to our system for sure. But yeah, I was listening to some of your podcasts that you've done with other people, and it sounds like your style, maybe just the style of those two bulls that were on the podcast were different, but it sounded like you're very comfortable spotting and stalking elk with your bow versus calling them into you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in an area where you don't have a ton of pressure, yeah, I mean, I'm okay with just trying to get as close as I can without making a sound. I do like to get out, in the mornings, if I'm out there in the morning, because that area we were hunting over there, we do a lot of we get up in the morning, a lot of mornings, and go up in glass and try to find elk. But if I'm already up there, if they've been regularly in a certain area several days in a row, I'll go hit it in the morning and maybe hit like a locator bugle or something, just to kind of get a feel for where they're at, and then, like you said, you kind of figure out what the wind's doing, what the thermals are doing, and just kind of push it close and see if you can find them. And sometimes you gotta hit a few cow calls or something to try to relocate them again. But I spot and stock, I have no problem with.
Do you, if it's open country like we were in, I feel like that spot's kind of weird because it's not that high elevation to have like a tree line, and then even the trees aren't that thick.
Right.
And so I feel like it's kind of a unique spot. Is that usually where you start to do more spot and stock, when it's like kind of that more open country? You're probably going to get windowed anyway. Very likely you're going to get windowed if you try to call them into you.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's that's the thing with open country too. If you're out there and you're doing a lot of calling and stuff, with especially with that particular area, I mean, all they really have to do, because you've got these timbered slopes, and then the opposite slope is completely bare.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if you're kind of working your way up this open slope, I mean, they can see you from that timber. And so if you start calling, they're looking over there and they're not seeing an elk. And so they're, a lot of times they'll either just sit tight or they'll just blow out the top. But whereas if you've kind of got a general idea of where they're at, I mean, you could. I'll do a lot of times where I'll see them go into the timber, and I'll slip up the bottom of that drainage, and hope the wind holds out, and and I'll just sit, pretty close to where I saw them go in the timber, and just wait for them to make a sound. That can be an all day thing, but that a lot of that comes from like you guys in the Midwest with whitetail hunting and stuff, sitting in a tree stand. I've done a lot of that. When I lived in Oklahoma, and and so for me, I can sit there all day. I have no problem. If I'm pretty confident that they're there, I'll sit all day and not make a sound, and and wait for them to get up and start moving around and making noise again, and then I'll decide how I'm going to approach it. But
yeah, it's kind of,
there's a lot of guys out west here that they don't have a lot of experience just sitting all day, and and they want to push that issue, and it usually doesn't go good, just because, like I said, the way the terrain is there, with the timber on that, on that kind of north side, and then the opposite slope being wide open, you're gonna get busted, and going through that timber, even though it's it's fairly open. There's most of it. There's not a ton of like bad deadfall, but it's hard to be quiet moving through there. And then when you trip over them, I mean, they know you're there.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a different unit. We're used to more black timber for sure.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's kind of funny you make the correlation to like whitetail hunting. We just had Ryan Carter on the podcast last week, and I'm sure
Okay.
you know him based on
Yep.
other people you know. And he said the
Yep.
same thing. He's like, I actually kind of just started putting together my whitetail patterning techniques with trail cameras and loops, and just started applying it to elk hunting. And then he obviously uses a lot of tree stands because he's hunting like
Yeah.
very early season, summer pattern stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I like what you say. And I think that unit, I think between the unit and the year we had last year, it was just a weird combination because it's a lot of elk, but they weren't very vocal for whatever reason.
Right.
And I heard that across a lot of the West last year.
Yep.
I don't understand how it could be the same thing like states away where it's like third week of September and we can't buy a bugle.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think that's where you might just have to change your tactics up. Like you said, if I get eyes on a herd and I put them to bed or close to, pushing the issue is going to maybe blow that one. It might take you 3 days to get on another, small batch of elk. And so
Yep.
if you want to push your issue when you got bulls going off everywhere. And it's like, okay, if we blow this one, we got another one 600
Right.
yards away. We can go
Yep.
chase.
And I've hunted that area like that too. I mean, that's the nice thing about that area. If you've got someplace where you can get up, you can glass those elk, and you can kind of see what they're doing. I honestly, I like to. My preference is to spend a day or two glassing before I try to make a move on them. But I've got that time.
Yeah.
There's some guys that they've got 5 days. They got to get in there and get it done. And so they'll try to make adjustments on the fly, and it works out. I mean, but there's been years, same area. I've actually killed 2 bulls up there within probably 100 yards of each other, 2 years in a row. And the first year, we called the bull in, and almost every morning it was just they were just going off, right before daylight. And so our strategy was, well, we're not going to waste time glassing. We're going to get up here where we know they've been, and we're going to call them, and move, call and move, and to try to get the wind and everything in our favor. And then the next year, I mean, we weren't hearing anything, and but again, that general area. I think the day I shot that bull, we'd watched him and a couple others the night before, and so that next morning I was like, well, let's just get after it. And we slipped in there, and and it took most of the day to find where he was, but it was kind of still hunting, kind of work our way around, and we just happened to spot him, bedded down below a tree. And we'd actually, like, the day had gone so slow, probably 10 minutes before we saw him, we'd called, like 30 yards away from where we'd seen him. We kind of set up, did some calling, and it was just absolute silence. And we just happened to catch a glimpse of him as we were kind of still hunting our way back through some timber. And and then I just I put together a plan and stalked on him, put a stalk on him, and lucked out.
Yeah, was that a bull that was like satellite?
Oh
bull?
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I've had the same exact thing happen in a different part of Montana. Me and a buddy we're walking through and it was like a slow day. And we're probably moving too fast, but we weren't even on elk. I mean, we're basically doing a glorified scouting mission. And we go through this patch of woods, and all of a sudden we just both stop, and it's like we got T-boned by a scent, right? And you're like, there's elk here. And so we slow up, and we find a patch of fur. Like, we find this bull bedded at 40 yards above us. And it must have been a cold, rainy day because the thermals were going down. And we tried to cow call. We were putting up glass, trying to make sure he was legal. Finally figured out he was legal. We're doing a cow. I mean, 40 yards. It's like, man, we're not set up to be doing calling. So like, we didn't really get too aggressive. Well, then our other two happened to meet us. Like, they came in like 30 yards below us. So now we are set up great. Like, we're perfect. They're 70 yards from the bull. We're 40. The bull can't see him. He's bedded behind these trees. We can only see patches of fur. And man, we had play signals. Like, I joked that we should get these quarterback arm straps so we can be like, do 2-4 or 2-0. But we got all the hand signals. And so we're like, ramp it up, cow call, bugle, give the bugle, give the chuckles. That bull didn't even care. 40 yards away. Didn't care at all. No peep. And so I think it's just, you got to keep that in mind, because a lot of people see Corey Jacobson run around on ridges and bugle, and they bugle back, and then he shoots them, and that's great. It works for sure. But what you didn't see is the 100 bugles he ripped without a response, and all the elk he runs by. And he will say, like, yeah, I run by elk all the time because I want to interact with one. I don't want to kill one.
Yeah.
And so it's like, not every bull in the woods is going to answer your call.
No. There's sometimes it's kind of you're just lucky that anything's talking, and especially when the area that where we met, you don't have like the wolf pressure and stuff like that, but you get over closer to Yellowstone Park and and those units around there, and there's a lot of times guys they won't hear a bugle in a week, and they're in elk every day, but they're not talking because of the predator situation.
Yeah, and that's we've hunted some gravelies, which is, I think it's a mountain range off the park, but it's still kind of part of that greater Yellowstone ecosystem, was what they say.
Yeah.
Bears and wolves for sure. I mean, we saw grizzlies. And we've actually had decent bugling in there. The reason we left is because we had a couple encounters that were a little close for comfort with grizzlies. And one year we were there was like 5 maulings in our valley the week we were there.
Yeah.
It was the year that all the beef cows ate they ate the wrong flour and died. Like, a whole herd died. And so I think they counted like 29 bears in this area. Feeding.
It was nuts. The amount of maulings they had. I mean, and there was like, I think there were 2 maulings where they attributed it to the same bear, and they were like 5 miles apart. Where they were from. The one guy got hit, and then like 2 days later, 5 miles away, another guy gets mauled by, and I think they said it was the same bear.
Right. Yeah. It was scary. They shut down half of a mountain, like a big mountain. They said, like, everything west of here is shut down. Do not go in there. Too many bears. We were hunting the other side of that mountain. And so halfway through the week, somebody got enough cell reception to check the news. And they were like, and so we're like, oh man, there's a lot of bears here. But then we're like, well, they're all over there, so we should be safe. Well, then halfway through the week, they're like, all right, all the bears went home. You guys can come hunt here, which obviously meant they went up and over back into our side. And we, going home, we stopped at a newspaper or a gas station, saw a newspaper, and it said, mauling number 3 or whatever it was that week, 1 mile up Fishhook Creek. I don't know what the creek was. And I'm like, Ben, didn't you kill a bull? Wasn't your bull like 1 mile up Fishhook Creek? And he's like, yeah. And he pulls up the map, and the chunk of woods was small, like 200 acres comparatively, like pretty small woods. And so it's like, oh, like goosebumps, right? Like, there's a good chance your kill, like your carcass was what that bear was there for, and then someone else got mauled You know,
Yeah.
how could you know? But it still gave us enough goosebumps. We're like, let's look for other places in Montana.
Yeah. Yep. I really, because, I do like typically like 10 to 14 days with my brother during archery season, but the rest of archery season, a lot of times I'm by myself. And, I guess there's some naivety to me, and so my wife has more common sense about that than I do, and she really encourages me to stay away from those grizzly areas, and but so I'll go check out a couple other spots where the the population isn't as prevalent.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's basically where we got to. Two guys in our group, they're kind of like last minute tag alongs. They're not really part of the group, but we kind of said if you want to camp with us, we can point you to some spots or whatever.
right.
They came up on a bear kill, or I don't know, it was a carcass hidden, buried, like logs and stuff. Like it was obvious a bear was like protecting this carcass. And then we saw a grizzly like 300 yards from our four-wheeler, and they texted us and said, it's like last light, me and my brother are hunting. And we get a text message and says, hey, just FYI, we saw a bear like 300 miles from, or 300 yards from your four-wheeler, kind of in between you and the four-wheeler. And we're like, oh. And so we look at each other and like, you want to see how fast we can sprint back to the four-wheeler and see if we can make it before dark? And he's like, yep. And so we just run. We're basically running off this mountain, racing the sun, looking for bears, like, bear spray out kind of thing. And it gets dark right before we get there. And we know where we are. We're like within 100 yards of the four-wheeler. So you're starting to be like, oh, we made it. And a coyote goes off like 10 yards from us in the woods, like the last strip of black timber. And we both lost a pair of underwear at that.
Yeah. And I mean, you're just your nerves are so on edge in a situation like that like, even though it's a coyote, you're like, you can convince yourself that it's more than that. And,
Yeah. It wasn't even like that. It was just like we had a finger on a hair trigger, and it's like we didn't know it was a coyote at first. We just heard this loud ass noise right next to us when we're thinking bear, right? And then it's like, oh, it was just coyote. Like, but still, man, we lost a pair of underwear on that one. And so that was kind of just added up, right? 5 people got mauled. We saw bears by camp. Elk hunting wasn't phenomenal. It was good, not great. Let's go find a different place to hunt. And that's what led us. I mean, we looked at the map and started over. Like, where should we possibly go? And we landed on the unit that you and I met in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which, to be fair, that unit has some frustrations, but we've seen more and bigger elk in that unit for a general unit than anywhere else we've hunted. Yeah.
No, it's a good unit. It's it just if you get as you get later into archery season and you get more guys coming in there, the pressure kind of they've got some pretty good little escape routes that they're gone, and you're done with those elk. But the nice thing is it's usually a couple of days and they'll kind of filter back in. And so, if you've got the time, again, some guys don't have that time, but if you've got the time to hang out and if you enjoy glassing, eventually it seems like they always come back in after a couple of days.
Yeah, and it seems like that unit is a good unit to test your adaptability as an elk hunter.
Yeah.
Like like if you have a lot of tools in your tool bag as an elk hunter, you can call, maybe you bring in a mobile tree stand setup, how to hunt sign and pass, like still hunt, stock, glass. Like, I feel like that's a good unit for someone that's real versatile. If you're like a one trick pony, you just got to hope that the elk are in the mood for that one trick.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So, I've heard you mention it twice now. You got a lot of time. And then obviously when we were talking, I last fall, I kind of got an insight to just to how much time you do have. But tell people kind of like how you were able to build, like structure this life that you're able to hunt 14 days with your brother and then send him back to work and then keep going after that.
Well, years ago, I am an engineer by education, but I've never worked in engineering. My wife is super smart. When we were young and first married, she was almost done with school. I still had some time left, and I was like, well, she got a great job offer. It would have been stupid to pass it up, and so I was like, I'll just finish school wherever we land. Well, by the time that school year was over, we were expecting our first child, and we'd gone down, and we were in Louisiana, and I was like, whoa, how would it be if I just stayed home with the kids? And she was like, really? And I was like, yeah, how hard can it be? And then so the rest kind of history. I mean, that our first daughter was born, and I remember sitting there, the day that my wife had to go back to work, and I'm sitting there with this child, and I'm like, I'm looking at her and going, all right, what are we gonna do? And I was just like, I'm just gonna do what I like to do, and I'm gonna take, and I'll throw her in a backpack, and we'll go do, we'll go fishing, we'll go hiking, we'll do all this stuff, and and so I pretty much raised my kids, and eventually got to the point where I had some freedom. I could start heading out and doing some of these longer hunts. And I got into archery, probably about 15 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that. But anyway, I just, she does really good. And when we moved to Colorado, I got a job. They were getting older. I've only got one left at home now, and so I took a job as a fly fishing guide, and then the outfitter I was working for, he ran hunts in the fall too, and so I started doing that, and kind of got into the industry a little bit, and met some super cool people, and I've just been able to, I've just had a lot of flexibility because my wife's smart. That's what it comes down to.
But you're also an electrical engineer on paper, right? So it's not like you're not smart.
No, I mean, what makes me smart is I married a smart chick.
Yeah. That's the real strategy there. And so that's kind of what I did. I married a pharmacist, and I'm also an electrical engineer. So you've given me a little bit of a roadmap, maybe to work towards.
Yeah.
But was it when you were guiding? Is that when you really developed your love for horses and mules?
Something like that. Yeah. After you get tossed off a horse a few times, and bitten, and I really enjoy how stubborn they are. They got a place in my heart.
Yeah. I think you mentioned while we were hunting in Glasson, if I never have to ride a horse again, I'll be happy.
Yeah. I've got some buddies that they'll do like horseback pack trips and stuff in the summer, and I'm like I'll walk. No, there was one day where we were hauling a pack string out, and we needed pack saddles on the horse that I normally rode to haul some clients back in, and they were like, are you okay walking out? And I'm like, yes, please. And I actually I left camp like probably about 15 minutes after they had taken off with the pack string, and I passed them right before we got back out to the trailhead. It was a couple miles, of trail, and no, I'm much more comfortable on my own feet versus having to trust a horse. They just don't like me. I don't know.
Yeah. My brother's the same way. And he says, I just don't like horses. I think the real secret is he never learned how to ride them, and he just smashes his nuts every time.
Well, I spent that year that I guided wilderness area hunts, horseback hunts. I mean, I was on a horse. I was looking at it one day, and it had been like 32 days straight that I'd been on a horse, for whether it was hunting or going out and hauling supplies in or whatever. And I still never developed a love of horses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting take. I mean, I look at a horse and be like, man, if I had a horse, all the shed hunting I could do or all the places I could go. But then you hear all these busted up cowboys that, fell off these horses. And I'm like, well, I just wouldn't do what you're doing. But then then I met you and you're like, I was literally doing everything I could possibly do to not get bucked off, and it still happened.
Yeah, for sure. I just, they don't like me. Well, and part of the problem is too, is like an outfitter typically, he doesn't have, like those cowboys that were up there pushing cows when we were, while we were hunting.
Yeah.
Your typical outfitter, he doesn't have a horse like that.
Yeah.
He's got some broke freaking, horse that he bought from from some place where they do trail rides, and they throw somebody on that horse for a couple miles, and then they come back, and that horse is made to walk up that trail and then walk back down that trail. And if you want them to do anything other than that, they're cantankerous.
Yeah, they're like the horses that those cowboys didn't want.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They're the horses that those cowboys would send to the dog food factory.
Yeah. Great horse. Got a great horse. It's only $500. And you're like, oh, shit.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty impressive we just saw a little bit of those cowboys working, but I remember just busting it one day to the very top. We walked from the bottom of the top. It's not like that big a deal, but you're definitely like a little winded when you get up there.
Oh, yeah.
And
sure.
You look and there's a guy on a horse in some country and you're like, holy crap. Like, I don't know how he got up there on that horse, but I would not be comfortable with that.
Right. Yep.
And then to chase cows down, like getting up's the easy part. Chasing the cows down is the real fun.
Yeah. And they're not just like slowly walking this horse down, down through. I mean, it's some pretty steep terrain, and they're on, they're running those horses, to catch cows trying to cut back or whatever. And I'm like, I am not that much of a horseman.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of think, like, if I ever did get animals for Western hunting, the llamas are starting to look better and better.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, I'm still going to walk, I'm not going to ride, but they're going to carry all the weight.
Right.
They feed themselves, basically.
Yep. And that's a huge, especially if you're doing, like a backpack hunt,
Yeah.
being able to take and, put, 60 pounds or whatever on a llama. I mean, you're just carrying your boat. I mean, it's awesome.
Yeah, literally. And then if you have a couple more for, like, if you shoot an elk, or even at that point, like when I think one thing people really forget about when you hunt deep, that I've talked to anyway, they're like, oh, that's so deep. Like, imagine getting an elk out of there. I'm like, you just break it up.
Right.
Like, I would rather do twice the trips on half the pack.
Yep.
Right. And if you have llamas, like, what's the big deal? Like, just make 3 trips with your llama. If you don't have any weight on you, you could probably do all 3 of those trips in a long day, or like 2 easy days.
Yep.
Like we're getting back to camp for happy hour each day type of a day.
Right.
And then it's like, it's nothing to walk 5-10 miles a day in the mountains if you don't have that weight.
Right. Yep. And
yeah.
And I mean, like the first trip out, you haul whatever you can meat wise, and then once you get back to camp, you're also dumping an extra 10 pounds, in bow. And so once you shift into that mode of you're just hauling meat out, you can streamline your pack pretty quickly to where you're just hauling meat. And and so you walk in, you're empty, come back out with a full load and just do what you can. There's a lot of guys that they'll pack on 100 pounds and or so, and try to do it all in one trip, and that's great. But as I'm getting older, I'm like, I'd rather just throw a couple extra trips in. It's a nice walk
Yeah.
in and come out heavy.
Yeah, especially the walk in, man. I mean, when you're in pack mode, you basically got your water bladder, a trekking pole, and your backpack.
Yeah.
Like, so the walk in, you're like 4 pounds, maybe.
Right.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The walk out sucks. I mean, I've done everything. I've done everything from half of a mule deer, half of a small mule deer, which is like probably less than some of my day packs I've packed up for a hunt.
Yeah.
Really. All the way up to about 175, 180. And I'll tell you, there's a sweet spot.
Yeah.
And it's not like, my name is Brian and my sweet spot is X. It's like how I'm feeling today, the training I did this summer.
Right.
That year I was doing 175, 180. I had also lost 60 pounds, worked my tail off doing double headers. I went through a breakup, and I found it's really easy to get in shape when you go through a breakup. And I drew a once in a lifetime tag. So I left my pack frame at the gym, and I'd put plates on it after my weightlifting and then go hit the stair climber with the stair climber. I really only got to 2 plates, but on a treadmill, I'd get to 3 plates, 3.5 plates.
Yeah.
And so I knew I could do it. Right. And I did the front and rear, and I walked out pretty clean. And that was 146. I weighed that without the pack, just the meat and bones weighed 146. When I got to the head and the neck, and I left way too much neck on the head, the hide was wet. I saved enough hide to mount 2 bulls. And then the antlers, and the way it got on my pack, not only was it 175 when I weighed it, but it was also such a mismanaged weight where like the balance was all off, and I had to stand at basically a 90, feet up, bent over to balance it. And that's where it's like I hit a hard wall that I couldn't do that anymore. Like the 146 when it was weighted nice is fine. Right. And I did the entire bull in one day. I've done 5 trips at this point, but that head, it crossed that threshold. It's like, if you can just keep under that, you can move so much faster.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my strategy. And I'm a bigger dude. I mean, I'm not a huge guy, but I'm not a small person either. So for me to do like an 80 or 100-pound pack is the equivalent of like my brother doing that 60-pound pack, because he's just a smaller guy than I am.
Yeah. It depends on, I mean, there's other factors too. Like, if you're only having to go a mile, I'm just going to make myself miserable, and we're going to get this,
right.
If I've got another guy with me, I take the time. I've gotten to the point where I really prefer to take the time to just go ahead, and break it down, get it off the bone. And, once you do that, I mean, it's doable with 2 guys to get that thing out a mile or 2. But and it's still it's freaking heavy, but it's doable. When you start getting into that, 5 miles, 10 miles, things like that, it's smarter to do it in multiple trips. It just is, for the majority of people. Just from the standpoint of saving your body. If you load that thing up and hurt yourself coming out, with that whole elk, then you're having to drop it anyway and make multiple trips hurt, and it's just not worth it.
Yeah. And especially when you start talking like a longer pack out, the longer your pack out is, the better chances you're going uphill and downhill. Like you're going up and over, up and over, up and over. And that's when that weight really starts to eat you alive.
Yeah.
versus like if you're talking a 1 mile pack out, that usually means it's kind of a straight line. We just got to go down, hit this road. Then we can dump it, and we might have a 4 mile around to get the four-wheeler or get the truck. But that's empty, and that doesn't matter. That's free.
Yeah, and that's another reason I like that area up there where we met is, you know, even if you've got your four-wheeler, you know, or whatever, even if it's sitting back at camp, you know, you can get that meat to someplace and drop it, and it's going to be, you know, it's going to be safe enough while you get back to camp and get that four-wheeler to come up and pick it up. You know, there's some roads there that kind of intersect in good spots that, you know, I don't necessarily like to drive up them, you know, when I'm hunting, but, you know, once I've got something down, you know, I'll go up and pick it up.
Yeah, that the unit really is, well, I'll put an asterisk on that. Most parts of that unit are really nice mountaineering unit, right? It's easy to navigate. It's easy to get places. It's almost too easy because like it's such an open woods that you're probably walking too fast and then you're jumping stuff.
Yeah.
Right. It's that easy, which kind of can be a double-edged sword, and that's what made calling kind of hard and a lot of things. But we went into a couple places kind of, you know, if you drew a line between our camp and your camp and then went farther back that way, up in there.
Yeah.
We got into that stuff, and that was gnarly.
Yeah.
That was nasty. We did like 1 hour loop, and we're like, nope, we're not hunting this.
Yeah. And I mean, I know exactly where you're talking about, and we've spent some time off and on up in there, and you know we've found sign and stuff, but you know the second time I think that I wandered up in there, I mean I was almost scared to call because it was so gnarly up in there. I knew
Didn't
if I
want to
got
run
something
through
coming,
it.
I was going to shoot it, and then I was going to have to get it out of there.
Yeah, exactly. And I got a sense that was like a summer spot, like because it's dark, it's cooler, there's more water, it's thicker, more blowdown, rocks. It was nasty. It just wasn't fun.
Yeah.
I felt like that was maybe where like older bulls would go in the summer to get out of the heat. But to me, it doesn't strike me as a good rut spot, because if I was a bull, like I would want access. Like I want to move fast. I want to find cows. I want to be able to run easy. And that's kind of where we were hunting.
Yeah.
Plus, you know, personally, I went there in rifle season. I did a big loop, big 7 mile loop. And on about mile 5, so I'm about as far away from the four-wheeler as possible, or the road, I fell through a bog. Just straight down. I took a solid step, took one more step, and there was no ground. The earth was not there anymore.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about up there, and it. I mean, it is. It's.
Yeah, I was not happy. I was relatively unwell mentally at that point in the hunt. This was like day 5.
Yeah,
we haven't had anything going this far. And I was just pissed. Now my whole legs are wet. I mean, I'd never hit bottom. I was just lucky enough that I went like this and put my arms out at goofy angles and caught something hard.
Right.
My gun went under. You know, I was carrying the Katfaru underarm thing.
Yeah.
That went halfway down. And then I had to walk. I mean, it's 30 degrees or 20 degrees, whatever it is. And I still had 2 miles, a solid 2 miles, maybe even 3 miles to get back to the four-wheeler. And it was prime time. And I'm just like, I'm done. I haven't seen as much of a squirrel, let alone an elk.
Yeah.
I'm going back to the cabin. I'm going to start a supper and take my clothes off and hang them up over the fire.
Yep.
So, yeah, that unit's a goofy one. It seems like that it's like the unit that doesn't want to play by the rules.
Right.
It's like, you think you're going to come here and call elk in? Well, let me throw this at you. Or you think you're just going to glass them and put them to bed? Well, let me throw this at you.
Yep.
They're going to be gone by the time you get there because somebody on a side-by-side just ripped through there.
Right. Yep.
So.
Or you're going to have somebody slip in on the ridge above you and, you know, and as they're coming up,
call their wife,
ridge, they get busted.
Talk on the phone while you're trying to sneak on these elk.
Yeah. Public land hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of funny. One thing, speaking of all that, one thing I wanted to touch on. So we were elk hunting, and we went up high one day because we did the Duane Sessions plan. We got up, had breakfast, went and glassed, sat in the Ranger, or you sat in the truck, stay warm. But we put some elk to bed, right? We followed some elk. We kind of saw where they went. So they're like, all right, perfect. We're going to go in after them. So we climb up there. But when we were up there, what was kind of interesting was that you were somewhere where you could see us. You could see these two hobos walking around.
Yep.
And tell people what caught your eye.
Your bow.
Yeah, my bow. So my bow is a white camo Matthews.
Yep.
And apparently that thing shined like a neon bar sign up there.
Yeah, because
so that's what
we're sitting over there, and we were kind of waiting to see if something would come up over the top of this ridge, and I just caught a glint, and just caught my eye, and I was like, oh, that's Brian's bow.
Yeah, I had it strapped to my pack, and when you said that, I always knew, like, oh, I bought it when I was going through a white camo phase in college, where I thought white camo was the coolest thing, and I was going to buy a truck and make it white camo type of mindset.
Yeah, that's a better phase than some people go through in college these days.
True. Yeah. It wasn't a white line phase. It was a white camo phase. And so I always knew it wasn't optimal, but I didn't think it really mattered that much. But when you said, yeah, I saw your bow from like 2 miles away with my naked eye, I'm like, all right, the next bow is not going to be white camo. Yeah. That's what kind of really put it in my mind that, like, this could be an issue now for elk hunting.
Yeah, I don't get as obsessive over that kind of stuff as I know guys that they go buy a brand new bow, and the first thing they do is they break it down and they rattle can that thing, just because they're like, this green ambush is too bright.
Oh,
yeah. They'll dull it out a little bit with spray paint but yeah, I do try to get some of those earth tone colors, but I don't I don't obsess about it to the point that some guys I know do.
Yeah, I don't either, but the white one, that struck me as, like, if it's that noticeable to a human, an elk's probably going to look at that, and they honestly might look at it and be like, I don't know what that is, but it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
But I just don't necessarily want them to be like scanning and be like, oh, there he is.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something.
So
there.
I'm going to do something. Earth tone, maybe I'll do that canyon. I don't know. I think I'm going to switch to Hoyt. You guys are shooting Hoyt, right?
No, I actually, I've been shooting Matthews for a couple of years. I am not married to a brand of bow. I go out and when I'm looking at a new bow, I shoot everything. I'll shoot a bear if they've got a bear there to shoot, just to see how it feels compared to the other bows, and but no, I've been shooting a Matthews for 3 years, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you shooting a heavy bow?
It's the one that I have set up for elk season is it's a VXR. So what is that? I think that's 3 or 4 years old, and it's the 31 and a half axle to axle. So it's the longer bow.
Yeah.
But I actually weighed it here the other day. I didn't have my quiver on it, which is my 7 arrow quiver probably puts it right at 10 pounds. But without the quiver on there, I think I was right under. I was just under 8.
Yeah, I remember you said that. Yeah, shoot a 10-pound bow, which seems heavy. I shoot a heavy bow. But that's because I have a pretty good sized stabilizer with some weight, and I have a back bar that I hunt with. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got.
So it adds up.
I think I've got a 12-inch stabilizer on the front, and then I've got a 10-inch back bar.
Yeah, I think I'm not to compare sizes, but I think I'm right in there somewhere. And then, are you shooting a lot of weight? Are you shooting a lot of poundage?
So my VXR is I've got the 75-pound mods on there.
Okay.
It honestly, the difference between the 70 and 75 isn't that much, but it gives me just enough. It gives me the optionality of I can maintain a good speed, because I shoot 150 grain broadheads for
Yeah.
elk, and so it gives me the option. I can maintain that. I'm right there somewhere between 280 and 285 feet per second. With a heavier broadhead.
Yeah, I recently just switched. I think I'm at like 175 grain, and that's I wish I could shoot a little faster because I feel like I'm big enough and I work out enough that 75, 80 pounds wouldn't be the issue for me.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to get some of that speed back.
Yeah.
But it's all like archery is just one of those things where it's almost like it's a journey, not a destination. Like rifle hunting is a destination. You build a rifle and it's done.
Yeah.
But like archery hunting, and I listened to some of the podcasts that you had with Brian, the other Brian Call, the more famous Brian, and talking about like how you got into it, and then you mean you've done a lot of work on your form and your archery journey yourself. Like, what have you found was kind of the biggest impacts to like not just accuracy, but just being sustainable, like really dialing in the form?
I was fortunate enough to when I met Brian Call, I was fortunate enough to be someplace where there's just there's an amazing shop, and and those guys, I mean, they really took me in and helped me work on that form. Kind of got me going down the right path, and then they started introducing some different tools. I've got all kinds of stories with hinge releases, sending them through my bow, punching myself in the face, things like that. But I haven't been as good about it here lately, but I try to get out and shoot, and I'm lucky too. I've got a lot of, I kind of live a little bit rural, so I can get out in the backyard and shoot. But I've got a buddy that he lived down in Austin in the suburbs for a long time, and he had like 15 yards where he could shoot down from his driveway into his garage, and he'd go out and shoot 24 arrows a day, and
yeah,
a lot of it's just repetition, and once you kind of get some instruction on what proper form is, it's recognizing when that form is breaking down. And so that's where I introduce like a hinge release, because for me that hinge release really makes me focus on my form to make that shot break clean. And and so I basically I've got a thumb release and a hinge release that are pretty much they're not the exact same company, but they're very similar dimensions. And so when I'm shooting with that hinge release, then when I pick up that thumb button, I just use that same form, and honestly, if your form's correct, it's going to go off the same way as that hinge release does. And I know a lot of guys that they go out, they pull their bow out, a month, 2 weeks before archery season starts, and they go out and they kill elk. And great, good on them. But me personally, I want to be ready, year all the time. And and so I put a lot of time into, as I'm walking around, working on the house or whatever, I take a few minutes for lunch or whatever, and I pull the bow out, and I hit the target out there at, a lot of times I'll shoot that target, not knowing exactly what the range is, and just seeing, because that's another good thing to do too. If you know where your arrow's hitting on your 30-yard pin, whether it's 25 or 35, you can get an idea of error calculation.
Oh yeah.
where that's going to hit if you're off by a few yards. And I just my fear is wounding an elk and then having to spend 3 days looking for it and then ultimately not finding it.
Yeah, that is, I mean, worst case scenario, right? I mean, that's like that wrecks the whole hunt. It wrecks the whole experience. You're going to think about it. I mean, for you'll be thinking about it till you get out next. But for us flatlanders, I mean, we're going to think about it the whole year. Like it's just going to eat at you for a whole year.
Yeah.
And we have we have a guy in our group that did that at once, and it bothered him for a long time.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say that, because that exact situation happened to me. I had a 6-point bull walk by. I was at very killable. Most, experts would have killed that bull 10 times out of 10 times, but I wasn't that confident in the air calculation, in the just picking up a bow and shooting it without the known distance.
Right.
And I felt like I needed to get this range in so bad that I wasted all my time trying to get a range, and I was shaking and I never got it. And he walked through the opening. And then after it all cooled down, I, ranged it was 35 yards.
Yeah.
And then that really taught me, like, if this is under 40 yards, you need to be able to kill that bull without your rangefinder.
Right.
Because you're not always going to have that luxury of pulling it out, having the time. I've noticed it's very hard for me to range when there's a bull because I'm going like this. I'm shaking so bad I can't get a good range. Now I can't even trust it when it goes off. So if it's that close, I really need to be able to know my distances and know how my bow is going to perform, so I don't have to waste that time.
And I'm like anybody. I mean, there's a level of arrogance that I can go out and I can pull that bow back and I can hit a target at 80, 90, 100 yards, and that's great. But I know so many guys that they get so focused on that 50 plus that they don't know what's going to happen inside that 40 yards, and they can't get the rangefinder on it. That's when you shoot over him, you shoot under him, because you don't know what those pins are like. Inside of 30 yards, I mean, you can use your 20-yard pin. You just need to know where to aim. So if you're off by 10 yards, you're still going to be in that. You're still going to be in that kill zone. You're going to be in those vitals.
And it's so important, because the closer you get, the less time you're going to have, the less movement you're going to be able to get away with.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, you just have to have that killer instinct that says it doesn't matter.
Right.
If this bull's at 32 or 26, I'm going to put my 20 on his lungs and the 40s on his heart, and this bull's going to die.
Exactly. But you've got to know that that's the case. And that comes through repetition and practice.
Yeah, that's good insight. I wish you would have told me that like 5 years ago, the year before I shot that or missed that shot at a bull, which is so equally frustrating, because like 2 days later, we're walking out of the timber into a meadow, and there's a bull feeding midday at 53 yards. And this opportunity has been eating at me for 2 days now of everything I messed up. I didn't stop him. I didn't get a range. I was shooting a single ping slider at the time, which is kind of feeding into why I thought I had needed this range. Nothing went to plan. So the second time, I did everything textbook. I knocked my arrow. I think I already had an arrow knocked because we could smell elk. I ranged him 53, dialed to 53, drew back as I stopped him. Did the stop him. Settle the pin, shot breaks, and there's an explosion about a foot in front of my bow. There was a branch that was so close. It was in front of my arrow, but not in my sight housing.
Yep.
And so when I shot, that tree went wild. I saw my lighted knock just sail way out into Yellowstone. I mean, Yellowstone's 20 miles away, but that's how far I missed this bull by.
Yeah.
30 feet over his back, and the bull just kind of whirls and looks like what happened. And my brother steps out from behind a tree, just like, Last of the Mohicans, takes an arrow out, pulls back, asks for the range. I'm like 60, shoots it, bull runs 2 miles straight back to the four-wheeler and tips over, and done deal. I'm like, that's just the way this works, I suppose.
Yeah.
Did everything right. Tree jumped out in front of me. Brother gets the bull.
Yep. But I mean, that's the thing too, is like in that situation, you're hunting as a pair, and you've got first shot. Your brother's not just standing there, with his proverbial what in his hand.
Yeah.
He's somewhat prepared that if something goes wrong with your shot, he can get that shot off. And
yeah,
that last bull I killed, he was dead with my arrow, but my brother was kind of down below me. My shot was 30 yards, and I think his was like 42 or something from where he was at. And but I hit that thing. I hit him, right in the chest. Killed him. But he went to stand up, and my brother was ready. And he threw another arrow up there because he saw him trying to get up, and that made a quick track job because he rolled right over in his bed and died right there.
Oh my gosh, that shooting an elk with a bow is, I haven't done it yet. My brother's done it a bunch, but that's going to be right up there. But watching him tip over is going to be like, that's the full circle of because otherwise, like, even if you drilled him, but he ran off and you didn't see him tip over, you're still going to be like, what happened? Like, I saw that arrow go in his heart and he ran 100 yards, and now I can't see him anymore. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Well, I had a great time talking to you. I don't want to kind of respect your time, even though you sounds like you got a lot of it, but we are coming up over an hour here. So maybe more so respect the listeners' time.
Yeah.
So awesome. Yeah. Give people a chance to follow you along with you. I want you to share your Instagram because it's amazing.
It's my Instagram is 303 Trophy Husband. Actually the outfit, one of the outfitters I worked for down in Colorado, he kind of gave me that one. I was kind of talking to him about guiding fly fishing for him, and he's like, well, what are you doing right now? Where do you work? And I kind of thought about it for a second, and I said, I'm a trophy husband. And he goes, you're hired.
Which is funny because I think I asked her, I got your Instagram like day 1 or 2 before I kind of knew that you actually were a trophy husband. And my first reaction was like, that doesn't seem to match the guy I just met. Like, that's a very strange Instagram handle. Then I found out, like, no, my wife works full time, so I'm kind of home with the kids, and then I just hunt and fish.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah, get on there, follow me. I'm always, people coming from from the Midwest, the South. You want advice on, I'm not going to give you like particular spots, but you want advice on gear that you might want to have, like realistically, there's a lot of opinions out there on gear. People tend to spend a lot more money than they need to. Tactics, anything like that. I mean, you can reach out to, I don't post a whole ton, but I'm always, I check my messages, and anybody that's got questions for me, I'm an open book on a lot of stuff. And, I want people to come out here and be successful. I guess I'm kind of in the minority on, the resident hunter. I like to see people come out from out of state. I like meeting people from out of state, and seeing them succeed I love it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a cool thing to see, to meet people in the hunting community that are like-minded and are helpful and open. I think it's just important, if you're going to be asking those questions, like, learn how to ask good questions.
Right.
So for example, don't ask, where should I go?
Right.
Ask, how should I look for a unit?
Right. Yep.
And then that gives us, or Duane or me or anyone, that gives you them more ability to answer your question, because they're not going to give you your spot. Right. But then they could say, well, if you're looking for just an experience in seeing elk, go to this website and look for, places that are over objective, or look for the kind of terrain that you feel comfortable hunt. Like, this is how I would find a unit. And then that's not only like going to teach you something, but then you're going to be able to do that over and over again. Or it's just, if Duane magically does give you a spot, it's probably a spot he doesn't like and it's not going to go to. But it's only one. Like, that's a one-time thing, right? Now, if you go there and it doesn't work, you're still out with anything. If Duane teaches you how you can look for a unit, then you can apply that to every hunt. So, yeah, learn how to ask good questions. You get a lot more information that way. So, awesome. Well, thanks for being here, Duane. Go check him out, 303 Trophy Husband. Lots of great fly fishing pictures. Lots of mule deer, lots of elk. So
hopefully as I start getting back out with the rod, there'll be more fly fishing pictures. But I'm going to try to get out with the camera a little bit more this spring and early summer too, and see what I can get. I've got some backpacking trips planned, and so I'm going to try to get the camera out a little more and try to get some pictures of some elk and moose and stuff like that going too.
Cool. There it is. Going to be a full service Instagram page. Awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks for being here.
Good to talk.
Thanks for listening, folks.